So we're seeing federal agents, boots on the ground right now in the Twin Cities.
Yeah, and this is not, a drill. This isn't some training exercise.
No, this is a full-blown operation.
It's a complex, multi-agency enforcement operation, and they have very specific targets.
And it seems they're focusing on individuals within the Somali community, also undocumented populations.
That's right. And this action, Alex, as drastic as it sounds, it's happening for a reason. You have agents from ICE, from DHS.
Or heavy hitters.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They are actively stopping people on the street, asking for documentation, and they're doing focused door-to-door searches for specific individuals on deportation lists.
That is an incredible level of federal pressure. That's the kind of thing you see applied to, major drug cartels, serious organized crime.
Exactly. And it's being brought to bear on one American state, because the trigger for this whole thing is just pure economic devastation.
You're talking about the fraud scheme?
A scheme that has potentially billed the state of Minnesota for over $1 billion. $1 billion for social services that were never even delivered.
$1 billion.
It is easily one of the biggest welfare fraud schemes in American history. And what's so fascinating, so bizarre here, is that the whole thing wasn't uncovered by some grand jury.
No.
No, not initially. It was exposed by this tiny, almost absurd financial detail. A single unpaid lien-in for $3,000 to $47.
$3,000.
On a luxury condo in Dallas. And that one little thread exposed a whole financial culture connecting a major political faction to this colossal failure of state oversight.
And now the federal machinery is moving in.
Which tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah.
The Democrats are not just concerned. They're in a state of what I would call survival-level scrambling.
Okay, so a $3,000 debt on a luxury condo somehow spirals into a $1 billion money pipeline with, you're saying, national security implications. We have to unpack this.
We do.
Stay with us as we expose the full truth right here on News Focus Podcast. If you want the news they don't want you to hear, hit that subscribe button right now.
Okay, let's start where all the political panic really began. That $3,047 figure.
Right, the unpaid limb.
It was slapped onto Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett's high-end condo in Dallas. And we're not talking about a recent bill. County records show this was ignored for months.
Well past due. And what's so significant here, it's not really the amount. $3,000 is a lot of money, but for a member of Congress...
It's the optics. It's the hypocrisy.
Exactly. How does a sitting lawmaker, someone who is constantly on television screaming about justice and accountability, just ignore a legally filed debt on her own property?
It makes no sense.
And what's fascinating is that this wasn't some clerical error that she, quickly corrected.
Right. Oops, my check got lost in the mail.
No, the filing was public, it was documented, and it was just allowed to sit there unpaid. And that exposes this deep, deep disconnect between who she says she is and what she actually does.
On one hand, you have this politician who's constantly moralizing about the ethical failures of everyone else. And on the other, you have, frankly, chaotic and messy personal financial management.
The moment that story surfaced, you could feel the narrative shift in Washington.
It was immediate. It brought her entire public image into question because it shows, at best, a lack of attention to detail. At worst,
it feels like she thinks she's above the rules that apply to everybody else.
That's the feeling of entitlement that people pick up on. And that suspicion is what really sticks.
And it suggests that while she's in D.C. giving these fiery speeches, fighting for the common person, she's ignoring her own basic financial responsibilities back home.
Which are tied to a luxury lifestyle, let's be clear.
Right. And that contrast just naturally leads you to look at her spending habits, which is where this whole thing just explodes.
It really does.
Yeah.
You have to remember, we're talking about a member of Congress who is paid $174,000 a year.
Which is a very good salary.
In Texas, where the average salary is, around $52,000? That's a substantial income.
Wait, hold on. I have to stop you there because the source material explicitly mentions her complaining about that salary, complaining that $174,000 is not enough to live on.
Yes, and it gets worse.
How?
She specifically cited her mortgage as a reason for her financial hardship.
Okay.
A mortgage that had an interest rate of 3%.
3%? Are you serious?
3%.
Today, the average 30-year fixed rate is north of 7%? Most people would kill for a 3% mortgage.
They would consider it a massive financial windfall, a huge competitive advantage. And yet, she's allegedly struggling so much she can't pay a $3,000 lien while publicly complaining about a sweetheart mortgage deal.
It just completely undermines her credibility.
It does. And the public immediately asks the obvious question. If this is how you handle your own very good salary and a 3% mortgage, how can we possibly trust you with the financial integrity of the entire nation?
And the chaos isn't just about what she wasn't paying, it's what she was paying for.
With donor money.
Oh.
At the exact same time.
That's the part that's just stunning.
The public filings, they reveal this almost unbelievable contrast. While that $3,000 debt was sitting there, overdue, she was simultaneously burning through over $75,000 in donor funds.
On what? Campaign mailers?
Oh, look close.
Yeah.
This wasn't for policy research or grassroots organizing. The filings show it went toward pure indulgence.
Okay, give us the specifics. What are we talking about here?
We're detailing charges for high-end travel, 5-star hotel stays,
Wow.
and full chauffeur services. We are talking black cars everywhere she went.
So a private driver.
Essentially, yes. This lifestyle, funded by the very donors she claims to be fighting for, it just paints this picture of someone who is profoundly out of touch.
The spending confirms a specific priority, and it's not her constituents.
The priority is indulgence over fiduciary duty. This wasn't survival spending, it was luxury spending. And the public outrage just confirms the suspicions that a lot of voters already had about how politicians misuse campaign funds.
So the moment that discrepancy, the unpaid bill versus the luxury cars, was highlighted by reporters, the story just spread like wildfire.
It became a contagion. It went from her personal financial problem to a systemic political problem almost overnight.
And of course, they immediately connected her behavior to others in her political cohort.
Absolutely. The parallels were immediately drawn to Rashida Tlaib,
Right.
who also faced intense scrutiny for spending tens of thousands of dollars on luxury limousines, also using campaign funds.
It's the exact same pattern.
High-end, full-time chauffeured service,
Yeah.
paid for with donor cash.
Mhm.
It becomes this common thread, this signature behavior.
And suddenly, the focus isn't just on Crockett anymore.
No, it's bigger. Analysts start calling it a squad money pipeline, a financial culture problem.
Because it suggests this kind of entitlement, this financial recklessness, is just tolerated, maybe even normal.
When you see multiple high-profile members of a group exhibiting the exact same behavior, it moves beyond coincidence.
Yeah.
It suggests a failure of the internal ethical culture. The message it sends to the public is that the rules they demand everyone else follow just don't apply to them.
And when reporters actually pressed Crockett on this, on the connection to Tlaib's spending, her reaction wasn't, calm or measured.
No, it was a visible meltdown.
Oh, what'd she do?
Her response was just deeply defensive, dismissive, and evasive. She lashed out, accused journalists of twisting the story,
Yeah, classic move.
and she implied that the public didn't even deserve to know the details of how their campaign donations were being spent.
That display wasn't confidence, that was panic.
Pure, unadulterated political panic. And you know what? That panic is warranted. Because she is now staring at the exact same political trajectory that already ended the career of Jamal Bowman.
Bowman is the perfect example here.
He's the textbook case.
Mm-hmm.
He had the high profile, the aggressive style, but then came the chaos.
A fire alarm incident.
Right. Then the serious ethics issues, and it all culminated in a devastating primary defeat, a complete political wipeout.
And that's the cautionary tale for this whole political faction.
It is. Once voters saw a pattern of erratic behavior and questionable financial choices with Bowman, they got rid of him. And now, behind the scenes, Democrats are in full-blown panic mode.
They're afraid she's next.
They fear that Crockett's refusal to pay a small debt, combined with the luxury spending and her public meltdown, makes her look exactly like the next member of that cohort to self-destruct.
And every moderate Democrat is terrified this is going to drag the whole party down.
It's guilt by association.
So you have a political faction where financial management is so reckless they can't handle a $3,000 bill, but they're happy to burn through tens of thousands in donor money on luxury cars.
While at the exact same time, a scandal involving another prominent member of that same political group is unfolding.
And that one involves $1 billion, federal agents, and grave international security concerns.
It's the ultimate confirmation of a political crisis. Crockett's personal ambition has been completely derailed by her own financial mismanagement, making her brand toxic.
And the billion-dollar mess in Minnesota around Ilhan Omar provides the devastating proof of how dangerous this systemic financial chaos can be when it's left unchecked.
It shows that political entitlement, whether it's small, like a condoline, or massive, like looting public services, creates a vulnerability.
A vulnerability that organized crime can, and in this case, did exploit.
Okay, so let's pivot now to Minnesota, to Ilhan Omar's home district, and the systemic fraud that really triggered this federal deep dive.
Right. Federal agents are now describing it as a vast crime scene under federal excavation.
So this wasn't just some local theft. This was an industrial-scale looting operation.
The word scale is almost inadequate here. The scope of this fraud is just immense, and it was running through multiple parallel, coordinated pipelines.
The one that got the most attention was the Feeding Our Future scheme. That's right, the FOF scheme. That one alone accounts for over $300 million stolen from federal child nutrition programs.
But the source material is very clear that FOF was just one piece of this much larger puzzle.
It was. And the key factor that allowed all of this to happen was the COVID-19 pandemic.
Because the government relaxed the rules.
They relaxed the federal guardrails for emergency spending. State auditors report that organized crime networks realized almost immediately that they could exploit these new programs.
And they moved fast.
Very fast. You saw similar rapid explosions in two other areas: autism therapy spending and housing stabilization services.
And when you look at those numbers, I mean, they're just statistically impossible under any normal circumstance.
They are mathematical proof of fraud. Autism therapy spending, it didn't just grow, it detonated.
What are we talking about numbers-wise?
It went from a manageable $2.6 million a year to an unbelievable $122 million in a very short period. And similarly, housing stabilization services, which is meant to help people with disabilities maintain their housing, it also exploded to $122 million.
That's a more than 4,000% increase in some cases.
Yes. It's just not possible for legitimate need to grow that fast.
So when Ilhan Omar was initially confronted with all of this, how did she explain it?
She tried to attribute it to administrative failures. Her claim was that when these new programs were set up so quickly during the crisis, a lot of the guardrails did not get created.
So she was implying the state government was just sloppy and criminals found the holes.
Exactly. She blamed administrative oversight issues, not intentional, organized crime.
But the federal findings, they tell a very different story.
They sharply contradict that narrative. Federal prosecutors and the FBI determined this was not simple bureaucratic negligence. They called it a sprawling organized scheme.
And they have proof.
They do. They've arrested the leaders of organized criminal networks. These were not random individuals taking advantage. These were sophisticated operations. Some of them were even connected to a prior $50 million theft ring.
So the message from the feds is clear. This was an industrial-scale looting machine operating right under the noses of state officials.
In concert, yes.
Let's dig into the mechanics of the FOF scam, since it was the biggest. How did they actually steal the money?
The program was designed to reimburse nonprofits for meals they provided to kids outside of school. During the pandemic, the USDA waived the rules that required site monitoring and pre-approval.
And that created the perfect storm.
It did. These organized groups allegedly set up phantom food distribution sites that never existed, or they would wildly exaggerate the number of kids they were serving.
Claiming to feed thousands a day when it was really just a handful.
Or none at all. Then they'd submit fraudulent invoices for millions of dollars of food that was never purchased.
And the state, lacking any monitoring and under pressure to get the federal aid out the door, just paid the bills.
They acted as a pass-through for the fraud. The state system effectively became a massive, unmonitored slush fund.
And the sheer audacity of that crime is what really raises the political stakes for Omar.
Precisely. Her district is the epicenter of this financial black hole. She is the prominent voice for the community where this organized crime flourished, which links her political fate to the largest welfare fraud case in U.S. history.
But the reason this went from a major local scandal to a national security priority is where the money went next.
That's the part that is truly chilling.
We're talking about taxpayer cash meant for hungry kids in Minnesota being routed overseas.
Massive amounts of it, systematically. It was allegedly done through remittance networks, informal value transfer systems, and cash couriers.
And a huge chunk of it flowed directly into Somalia.
It did.
Okay, we need to clarify what these remittance networks are and why they're so hard for the government to track.
Sure. A remittance network, it's also called a hawala system, is basically an informal, trust-based money transfer system. It's very common in diaspora communities.
Right.
So you give cash to an agent here in the U.S., and another agent in Somalia delivers the equivalent amount to the recipient, all without a formal bank wire. They just rely on ledgers and trust,
So it's outside the normal banking system.
which makes it notoriously difficult for Treasury analysts to trace the flow of illicit funds compared to, say, a normal wire transfer.
So millions in fraudulent welfare cash started pouring into these untraceable pathways leading straight into Somalia. Why did that specific pattern trigger national security alarm bells?
Because of the financial signature of the transfers.
What did that mean?
When Treasury analysts flagged these patterns, they immediately recognized a chilling similarity. They matched the known pathways and the techniques used in previous high-priority terror financing investigations.
Investigations that were directly tied to al-Shabaab.
The al-Qaeda-linked extremist group in Somalia, yes.
Now, let's be absolutely precise here. The source material confirms that federal agencies have not said that these Minnesota welfare dollars directly funded terrorism.
That is correct. A direct, provable link between a specific stolen dollar and a specific al-Shabaab operative has not been confirmed publicly.
How?
However, the financial patterns, the sheer volume of cash, the speed of movement, the destination, and the reliance on these specific informal transfer methods were so eerily similar to known extremist financing routes that the operation was immediately escalated.
And under President Trump, it was designated a national security priority.
Instantly. It moved the investigation from a matter of fraud to a potential counter-terror concern.
And when you realize the gravity of that, the political reactions we saw from Ilhan Omar suddenly make a lot more sense.
The desperate, emotional speeches in Minneapolis, shouting about xenophobia, attacking reporters.
That wasn't damage control for a small administrative error.
No, that was panic. Because the federal government had just pulled the national security card, they signaled they were not going to treat this as a simple paperwork problem anymore.
They realized American taxpayer money could be inadvertently supporting geopolitical instability.
And the more vocal she became, the more political leverage President Trump gained.
Which brings us to his statement. He didn't use any nuanced policy language. He just came out with a direct, unvarnished comment that completely reframed the scandal.
When he was asked about it, he said plainly, "Somalians have caused a lot of trouble. They're ripping us off for a lot of money. We're not taking their people anymore, and we're getting a lot of their people out."
And that statement was like a political earthquake. It just instantly shifted the public discourse.
It was no longer just about misplaced funds. It was about immigration integrity and national security being breached at the same time.
And that directive kicked off a massive, coordinated government sweep.
We saw the DOJ expand its fraud task force, DHS pulled every relevant immigration report, and the Treasury Department widened its remittance tracking net, flagging these transfers in real time.
So this wasn't just the FBI. This was DHS, ICE, DOJ, Treasury, all of them treating Minnesota like a multi-billion-dollar crime scene.
Under federal excavation, insiders confirmed that Trump's instruction was basically to treat every unexplained transfer as illicit until proven otherwise.
That's a huge strategic shift.
It is. Under previous protocols, this might have been contained locally, maybe dismissed as bureaucratic clutter. But now, with that potential terror financing link, accountability is back on the table.
And the federal noose is tightening.
Not just around the criminals, but around the state leadership that allegedly allowed this whole environment to flourish.
Okay, so the moment the federal government put that national security lens on this scandal, the focus shifted right to the top of the state government, to Governor Tim Walz.
Yes, the Democratic governor. This is where a local failure allegedly becomes a full-blown political cover-up.
It becomes a systemic crisis, and the evidence suggests that Walz's office wasn't just negligent. The source material alleges a conscious political calculation was made to shield the fraud.
That's the core allegation.
So let's lay out the timeline here. Walz was warned about this massive organized fraud years ago. Who warned him?
His own internal investigators, specifically people within the Department of Human Services, the DHS, which oversees all these programs.
So his own people.
His own people were raising red flags about the exponential growth in programs like the autism therapy and housing services. They believed they were being systematically defrauded.
And the warnings were clear.
Allegedly clear and direct. The state was hemorrhaging taxpayer money to coordinated criminal rings.
So if he had these internal warnings years ago, why would a governor who is responsible for taxpayer money allegedly ignore them?
The alleged motive is what turns this from simple negligence into intentional political shielding.
Oh, okay.
The claim is that Walz feared that cracking down on nonprofits tied to the Minnesota Somali community would risk alienating a core Democratic voting bloc.
So it was a political calculation.
The allegation is that protecting his political coalition was prioritized over aggressively prosecuting organized fraud rings who were siphoning off billions of dollars.
So they delayed investigations.
Allegedly, yes. Investigations were delayed, reports were ignored, and warning signs were systematically dismissed, all to avoid political backlash.
That is exactly why critics are framing this as Minnesota's Watergate.
Right. It moves beyond incompetence. It becomes a deliberate act of political self-preservation at the expense of public safety and financial integrity.
Watergate was defined by the cover-up, the abuse of power to protect political allies.
Which is exactly what the whistleblowers allege happened here. And that systemic abuse triggered something I've never seen before, a whistleblower mutiny.
This part of the story is just incredible. We're not talking about one or two disgruntled employees here.
No, we are talking about over 480 state employees, DHS workers, publicly accusing their own governor of facilitating this fraud.
480 people.
Just think about the collective risk, the professional courage that took for that many people to publicly revolt against their employer, the state of Minnesota.
And what did they accuse him of?
They accused him of actively shielding the people engaged in the fraud and, critically, of retaliating against any internal investigator or employee who tried to expose it.
What kind of retaliation are we talking about?
They detailed a system of extreme intimidation. They alleged that careers were actively threatened. Internal reports that detailed the theft were just buried.
So they were silenced.
Investigators who pushed too hard were sidelined, or their entire departments were dismantled. And some of the most alarming claims involve targeted intimidation tactics against the families of employees who tried to blow the whistle.
They went after their families.
That's the allegation, which suggests a level of coordinated ruthlessness designed not just to cover up negligence, but to protect an ongoing criminal enterprise.
The employees were describing a system where silence enabled industrial-scale looting, and speaking the truth meant risking your entire livelihood.
And remember, the initial federal estimate on this fraud was around $1 billion. The whistleblowers themselves, the people who worked inside that system, they suggested the final true cost could reach an unimaginable $10 billion.
$10 billion. It's just a staggering number. And it paints a picture of a political leader who wasn't just asleep at the wheel.
No, the allegation is that Governor Walz intentionally disabled the safety systems, the guardrails, to maintain his political coalition. It is the textbook definition of corruption at the highest level of state government.
And the political pressure finally became unbearable when he was forced to address this on national television.
His now infamous meltdown on Meet the Press.
When he was pressed directly on why Minnesota suffered the largest welfare fraud scandal in U.S. history, he just seemed completely unable to offer a coherent answer.
His defense was a masterclass in strategic avoidance. He blamed national politics. He blamed cuts to the Inspector General's office.
Anything but his own administration.
And then, in a move that analysts just found deeply confusing, he blamed prosperity for attracting the criminals.
He blamed prosperity, as in Minnesota was too successful and that's why the criminals come.
That was the claim, that Minnesota's success made it a magnet for fraudsters. He was effectively trying to frame the fraud as some external consequence of his good governance, rather than a catastrophic internal failure of oversight.
He was desperately trying to avoid the core issue.
At one point, he tried to claim he takes responsibility for putting people in jail, which was a comment that immediately went viral because it answered none of the fundamental questions about his administration's alleged failures.
That whole interview was just the clearest sign that he was drowning in this scandal and had no strategy to get out.
And that meltdown gave President Trump the perfect opening to issue a devastating national verdict.
He didn't hold back.
Not at all. When asked directly about Walz's conduct, Trump didn't offer any political niceties. He just said there's something really wrong with him and accused Walz of letting billions in taxpayer dollars disappear.
He effectively confirmed the suspicions of millions of Americans who watched this whole thing unfold.
He did.
So if we step back and look at this entire arc of chaos, from a tiny $3,000 lien on a condo to a $1 billion money pipeline possibly linked to terror, what is the central finding here?
I think the central finding is twofold, and it really exposes a structural problem. First, the financial chaos around Crockett and Taleb, it confirms a pervasive culture of entitlement.
A poor sense of fiduciary duty.
Right. They talk about protecting the vulnerable while treating public and donor money like a personal lottery account. And that just erodes public trust.
And the second part.
The Minnesota pipeline. It provides the staggering real-world cost of weak state oversight. It shows what happens when political convenience, that alleged fear of alienating a voting bloc, is allowed to trump rigorous accountability.
It created a gold rush for criminals.
And because of the specific financial ruse they used, it led directly to potential national security nightmares, with money flowing through pathways historically linked to terror financing.
So what's the ultimate implication here?
The era of local politicians being able to contain or just ignore corruption is over. The fact that the entire federal machinery, Treasury, FBI, DHS, ICE is now actively mapping these money trails means this is no longer just a state problem, it's a national reckoning.
A new era of accountability.
This aggressive federal response, which was triggered by that potential terror link, will inevitably tighten the noose in all 50 states where similar pandemic-era oversight failures might have happened.
That's the reality we're facing. But I want to know what you think. Tim Walz allegedly shielded this fraud to protect a political voting bloc. Do you believe political convenience should ever trump accountability for taxpayer money? Let us know your opinion in the comments below. We read every single one. I'm Alex.
And I'm Sophia. Thanks for listening to News Focus.